Hi there, welcome to the latest edition of my 10-minute moan. And on this one, I will look to investigate a potential conflict of interest of the very highest order with Humza Yousaf and Dorothy Bain KC, who is not only the Lord Advocate but the Chief Prosecutor in Scotland. Now, before I continue, although I'm suggesting there could potentially be a conflict of interest here, I'm by no way suggesting that there's any impropriety, particularly in the part of the Lord Advocate. I'm just looking at a question that's been in the public domain for a long, long time. And even pre-Salmond, legal minds have argued that the role in itself as a Lord Advocate of Scotland, because it's a dual role, you're not only the Lord Advocate who gives legal advice to the government, you're also a Cabinet Minister. That's one half of the job, Cabinet Minister and Advisor. And in your other role, you are, in effect, the Chief Prosecutor of Scotland, in charge of the prosecution services. So, legal minds well before recent events and before even the Salmond inquiry have questioned whether this role should indeed be split. And back in 2021, a lot of Scottish lawyers discussed it and overwhelmingly agreed that this role should be split. During the Alex Salmond inquiry, there was a very odd situation that Wolf, who was a QC at the time, who was the Lord Advocate, he was involved in it twice because he was giving the government their legal advice when they first had their inquiry into Alex Salmond's complaints he had at government level. So he was involved in that, and then after that inquiry, obviously Alex Salmond went to court with criminal charges, and Wolf QC was the procurator, the Chief Procurator in charge of the COP FS. Today we've got Dorothy Bain, who's a KC now that obviously the Queen's passed away, they're now known as KCs, who Nicola Sturgeon had nominated on the 22nd of June 2021 to replace Wolf as the Lord Advocate for Scotland. And to be fair to Dorothy Bain, she seems to be in favour of splitting these roles as well. She actually spoke in Parliament about that. However, she gave the recommendation that the role should be split, but government, in terms of Nicola Sturgeon and Humza Yousaf, have both agreed that by the end of this Parliament, which could potentially be another 2 years, they will review it in the Scottish Parliament. So right up to now where we are, leaves us with the news, recent news, that the current First Minister, his brother-in-law, has been charged, arrested for 2 crimes. He was arrested for allegedly supplying drugs, went to court on Monday, and as he was leaving the courtroom because he was made no plea and was released in bail, he was rearrested, where a man had miraculously left a flat via its window, and he was arrested in connection to that incident. However, he has since been released pending further investigation. But this man is the brother-in-law, the brother of the First Minister's wife, and he's been prosecuted. Now, Humza Yousaf sits in the same cabinet as Dorothy Bain, who's the head prosecutor. Now, again, I'm not suggesting any impropriety at all, particularly in the part of Dorothy Bain, who I have a damn sight more view on, a far better view on than Humza Yousaf. To be quite frank, I wouldn't believe that man, as one of my viewers quite eloquently put it on one of the comments. If he told me the stuff in the pound shop was £1, I would check if Humza Yousaf told me that. However, Dorothy Bain is a completely different proposition. Someone I have no reason to question her integrity. But this is a clear conflict of interest that Dorothy Bain has to sit in a cabinet with Humza Yousaf. Now, again, I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that that would sway her in her prosecution of the man's wife's brother. But I'm quite sure she's a very, very intellectual woman, and I'm quite sure she has considered this point herself. I doubt it would be probably the best outcome for her to stand down from her position. That's not what I'm saying here at all. But what I am curious to find out is how can those two characters, one who I think would actually wish to prove and show quite clearly that there is no conflict of interest, and one that I wouldn't believe even if he just stood up with his right hand to the sky and declared there was no conflict of interest. There is a clear conflict of interest, but conflict of interests are not the end of the world. I've been in situations with committees where I've come across a conflict of interest. I've declared that interest and stood back from the debate about that particular subject. But I wouldn't give Humza Yousaf the respect to expect him to do the same. I don't trust the man. And I've got a certain amount of empathy for Dorothy Bain, who is probably a more intelligent person than me and knows this character far better than me. And if my judge of character is correct, then she would have figured this out long before I did. And she's in a pretty shitty position here, to be honest with you. But I would trust her to go into cabinet meetings and be able to remove herself from any discussion about this. But then when she walks out that door and she goes into the prosecution role, it's going to be quite difficult when she's discussing or potentially discussing any of these details, knowing that she's in a cabinet with the accused's brother-in-law. It's horrific for her, and a potential for someone I don't trust, the First Minister, to possibly not put pressure on, but discuss it and try and help that situation for his family. And it'd be interesting to hear from Dorothy Bain or someone with a better legal mind than me to explain how the country can be assured, or what measures need to be put in place to ensure that this conflict of interest should not be an issue, not be a problem that we have to worry about. Now, that will not mean Humza Yousaf standing up and First Minister's questions on Thursday. If somebody was to ask him and say, "Oh, I promise I won't," I wouldn't trust him as far as I throw him. So I would like to know from someone more trustworthy. And the ideal candidate for that would probably be Dorothy Bain KC. If she could explain to me as a member of the public why and how this would work and what instruments would be put in place to ensure there is no conflict of interest there, then I would be completely happy with that. But silence is deafening. And I don't think, now that I've pointed it out, I'll be the only person that in the public that would be quite, warming to know what's going to be done to ensure there is no conflict of interest between the Chief Prosecutor for the country, who is also the Lord Advocate, who shares a cabinet with the First Minister of Scotland, whose wife's brother has been charged with supplying drugs. That would be quite nice. Okay? But, as I say, Dorothy Bain, no questioning of her integrity whatsoever, but I think it would be good for her, good for the public, and good for the country if we could have some assurances from someone not in the SNP. Okay? Well, thanks very much for tuning in. If you like it, hit the thumbs up. If you want to see more, subscribe and hit the notifications. But most importantly of all, have a great day. Bye now.